If your family being told to eat in the bathroom by your own daughter-in-law in front of everyone you know. Most people would walk away in tears, but I had the power to change everything in a single night. Stay with me, because the end will leave you breathless. It's a crisp Saturday evening. It's a kind where the air feels just a little bit magical, and the city lights twinkle like they're in on a secret. My son Matthew is turning 35, and to celebrate, he and his wife Lauren have invited the whole family to the fanciest restaurant in town. I'm talking about the kind of place where the valet takes your car with a little bow. The chandeliers look like they belong in a palace, and the waiters glide around in tuxedos, looking as if they've never cracked a smile in their lives. I'd even bought a new dress for the occasion, a deep blue number that made me feel 10 years younger. And I'd spent a little extra time curling my hair just so. After all, it's not every day your only son hits such a milestone. As I walked into the restaurant, I felt a flutter of excitement. The room was buzzing with laughter and the clinking of glasses. I spotted my family at a long, beautifully set table near the window, sunlight streaming in and making the silverware sparkle. There was my sister, my grandkids, a few cousins, and of course, Lauren, sitting at the head of the table, looking like she owned the place. I smiled and waved, expecting to be greeted with the usual hugs and "Happy birthday, Matthew" chorus. But as I approached, something felt off. There was a gap at the table, an empty space where a chair should have been. I looked around, thinking maybe someone had just gotten up to use the restroom, but no. Every seat was filled except for that one glaring spot. I paused, a little confused, and glanced at Lauren. Before I could even open my mouth to ask about the missing chair, she looked up at me with a smirk that could curdle milk. And then, in a voice loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear, she said, "Look, Mrs. Helen, can't you see there's no space? Go eat in the bathroom. You're already used to it." The words hung in the air, sharp and cold, and for a split second the whole room seemed to go silent. Then, as if on cue, a few of the guests, her friends, mostly, started to snicker. Even the waiters paused, unsure whether to laugh or look away. My son Matthew just stared down at his plate, his face turning a shade paler. But he didn't say a word. Have you ever felt your cheeks burn so hot you could fry an egg on them? That's exactly how I felt in that moment. My heart pounded in. My chest and I could feel every pair of eyes in the room on me, waiting to see what I'd do. Part of me wanted to disappear, to shrink down so small I could slip under the table and vanish. Another part of me wanted to snap back, to give Lauren a piece of my mind right then and there. But I remembered something my mother used to say: dignity is silent. Let fools make the noise. So I took a deep breath, straightened my jacket, and forced a small, polite smile. I looked at Lauren, then at my son, and then at the rest of the table. No one met my eyes. Not even my grandkids, who usually ran up to hug me the moment I walked in. I realized, in that instant, that this wasn't just about a missing chair. It was about respect, or rather, the lack of it. I'd spent years trying to be the perfect mother-in-law, always biting my tongue, always putting everyone else's comfort before my own. I'd laughed off Lauren's little jabs at family dinners, ignored her eye rolls, and let her take over holidays, thinking it was just part of the adjustment. But this was different. This was public humiliation. And it stung in a way I hadn't expected. I could feel the tears threatening to spill, but I refused to give her the satisfaction. Instead, I stood up a little straighter, smoothed my dress, and said as calmly as I could, "Well, I wouldn't want to take up anyone's space." My voice was steady, but inside, I was shaking. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the restaurant, my heels clicking on the marble floor. I didn't look back, not even when I heard Lauren's laughter echo behind me, or when I caught a glimpse of my son's face. Frozen in shock, as I stepped outside. The cool evening air hit my face, and I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for the family I thought I had, and relief that I'd finally stood up for myself, even if it was just by walking away. I didn't know what would happen next, But I knew one thing for sure. I was done letting anyone, especially Lauren, treat me like I didn't matter. Funny how life works, isn't it? Sometimes the moments that break your heart are the very ones that set you free. And as I walked to my car, head held high, I couldn't help but wonder what would they do when they realized the real party was just beginning. And I was the one holding all the cards. If only they knew what was coming next. I sat in my car for a long moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching the golden glow of the restaurant fade in my rearview mirror. My heart was still pounding, but now it wasn't from embarrassment. It was from something else. Something sharper. Spent my whole life being the peacemaker, the one who smoothed things over, who swallowed her pride for the sake of family harmony. But as I sat there, the sting of Lauren's words still echoing in my ears, I realized I was done playing that role. I was tired of being invisible, tired of being the punchline to someone else's joke. And as fate would have it, I was in a unique position to do something about it. You see, what Lauren and, frankly, most of my family ever bothered to ask was what I did before I became just mom or just grandma. They never asked about the years I spent building my company from the ground up, working late nights and early mornings, juggling board meetings and ballet recitals, learning to read a balance sheet as easily as a bedtime story. They never asked how I managed to turn a tiny home-based business into a thriving corporation, or how I'd weathered recessions, betrayals, and more than a few glass ceilings. To them, I was just the woman who brought the potato salad to Thanksgiving and remembered everyone's birthdays. But the truth was, I was the reason they were all sitting in that fancy restaurant in the first place. I took a deep breath, pulled out my phone, and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. My lawyer, Greg, had been with me since the early days. He'd seen me through every high and low. And he knew better than anyone that when I made up my mind, there was no turning back. The phone rang twice before he picked up, his voice warm and familiar. "Helen, how's the party?" I smiled, though there was no humor in it. "Greg, I need you to do something for me. I want to sell the company. All of it." There was a pause, and I could practically hear him sputtering into his coffee. "Sell it, Helen? Are you sure?" "That's a big move. Never been more sure," I said, my voice steady. "I'm done. It's time." He hesitated, then said, "All right, I'll get the paperwork started." "But Helen, are you okay?" I thought about that for a moment. Was I okay? I wasn't sure. But I knew I was ready. Ready to stop letting other people define my worth? Ready to take back control of my own story? After hanging up, I sat for a moment, letting the weight of the decision settle over me. Felt good, liberating even. I'd spent so many years worrying about everyone else's happiness. But tonight, I was finally doing something for myself. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. With a little smirk, I dialed the restaurant. The manager answered, his voice polite but distracted, no doubt busy with the chaos of a packed Saturday night. "Hello, this is La Belle Maison. How can I help you?" "Hi, this is Helen Carter. I'm calling about the Carter party, the one in the main dining room. I'd like to cancel the buffet payment." There was a stunned silence on the other end. "Excuse me, ma'am. You heard me. Cancel the payment. The party's over," stammered. "But, ma'am, the food has already been served. I understand. But the bill was supposed to go to my company, and as of tonight, that company is being sold. I'm no longer responsible for the payment. You'll need to speak with my daughter-in-law, Lauren. It's the one who planned the seating arrangements, after all." I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, the panic rising as he realized what this meant. I'll have to speak with the party host." "Please do," I said, my voice sweet as honey. "And thank you for your understanding." I hung up, feeling a sense of satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't about revenge. Not. Really, it was about respect. It's about reminding everyone, myself included, that I was more than just a placeholder at the table. I was the one who built the table. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Was it petty? Maybe, but sometimes you have to draw a line. Sometimes you have to remind people that kindness is not weakness, and that the quietest person in the room is often the one with the most power. Back inside the restaurant, I could only imagine the scene unfolding. The manager approaching the table, whispering urgently in Lauren's ear. The confusion, the embarrassment, the dawning realization that the party was over, and that the bill was now her problem. I pictured Lauren's face, the smug smile wiped, clean, replaced by shock and maybe, just maybe, a little humility. I wondered if my son would finally look up from his plate, finally see the woman who had given him everything. Ladies, have you ever wanted to see a room full of people go from smug to stunned in 5 seconds flat? 'Cause that's exactly what happened next. The laughter died, the whisper started, and suddenly, the woman they'd all overlooked was the one calling the shots. As I drove away, the city lights blurring past, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. And as for Lauren, well, let's just say she was about to learn a very important lesson about underestimating the quiet ones, and me. I was just getting started. Back at the restaurant, the air shifted from celebration to confusion in a matter of seconds. The clinking of glasses and cheerful chatter faded as the manager, a tall man with a nervous twitch in his eye, hurried toward the Carter party. He leaned in close to Lauren, whispering urgently, his face growing more serious with every word. Lauren's smile faltered, her laughter dying on her lips as she glanced around, suddenly aware that all eyes were on her. My son Matthew looked up from his plate, his brow furrowing as he tried to make sense of the commotion. The waiters, who had been gliding gracefully between tables, now moved with frantic energy, whisking away plates and quietly collecting half-eaten meals. The music, which had been a soft, elegant backdrop, came to an abrupt halt, leaving an uncomfortable silence hanging over the room. Guests shifted in their seats, some whispering to each other, others simply staring at the spectacle unfolding before them. The atmosphere, once so full of joy and anticipation, now felt heavy and uncertain, as if everyone was waiting for the next shoe to drop. Lauren's friends, who had been so quick to laugh at her cruel joke, now looked away, their faces flushed with embarrassment. My grandkids, sensing the tension, huddled close to their father, their eyes wide and confused. Matthew, finally realizing something was very wrong, stood up and excused himself, weaving through the maze of tables and out into the lobby. He found me just as I was about to leave, his face a mixture of shock, hurt, and something else maybe. "Regret, Mom? What happened? Why did you do that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, I saw the little boy he used to be, the one who would run to me with scraped knees and tear-streaked cheeks, looking for comfort and answers. But this time, I didn't have a bandage or a gentle word to offer. This time, the wound was deeper and the lesson was his to learn. Before I could answer, Lauren burst through the doors, her heels clicking frantically on the marble floor. Her mascara was smudged, her hair slightly askew, and her carefully composed facade had crumbled. Dropped to her knees right there in the lobby, her hands clasped together in desperate supplication. "Please, Mrs. Helen, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. Please forgive me." Her voice was thick with tears, her words tumbling out in a rush. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the sting of her words, the laughter of the guests, and the look on my son's face as he sat silently by. I remembered all the times I'd let things slide, all the times I'd chosen peace over self-respect, and I knew I couldn't do it anymore. You know, people always say that forgiveness is a virtue, that we should turn the other cheek and let bygones be bygones. And most of the time, I agree. But sometimes sorry just isn't enough. Sometimes people need to learn that respect isn't optionally earned. I looked down at Lauren, her tears pooling on the polished floor, and I felt a strange sense of calm. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was simply done. Lauren, I said quietly, I hope you remember this moment. I hope you remember how it feels to be left out, to be humiliated in front of people you care about. Because that's how you made me feel tonight, and I won't let it happen again. Matthew reached for my arm, his grip gentle but pleading. Mom, please, let's just go back inside. We can fix this. I shook my head, my resolve firm. No, Matthew, some things can't be fixed with an apology or a quick hug. Some things need time and a little humility. Could see the realization dawning in his eyes, the understanding that this wasn't just about a missed chair or a canceled buffet. This was about years of being taken for granted, of being treated as an afterthought. This was about finally standing up and saying enough. Inside, the guests were starting to gather their things, their faces a mix of confusion and disappointment. The party was over, the celebration cut short, and the memory of the night would linger long after the last guest had left. Lauren's friends avoided her gaze, their earlier laughter now a distant memory. My grandkids clung to their father, sensing that something important had changed, even if they didn't fully understand what it was. The manager, looking flustered and apologetic, tried to smooth things over, but the damage was done. The story of the night would be retold for years to come. A cautionary tale about pride, respect, and the quiet strength of a woman who had finally had enough. As I walked out into the cool night air, I felt lighter than I had in years. I didn't know what the future held, whether Matthew and Lauren would learn from this, whether our family would heal or drift further apart. But I knew one thing for certain. I had reclaimed my dignity, my self-respect, and my voice. And that, I realized, was worth more than any apology. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones that teach us the most, not just about others, but about ourselves. And as I walked away from the restaurant, head held high, I knew that I was finally free. I walked away from the restaurant that night with my head held high, the city lights twinkling around me like 1,000 tiny reminders that life was still full of possibility. It wasn't about winning. Not really. It was about finally standing up for myself, about drawing a line in the sand and saying no more. For years, I'd let little slights and big insults slide, always telling myself it was better to keep the peace, to avoid drama, to be the bigger person. But as I stepped into the cool night air, I realized that sometimes being the bigger person means standing tall, even if you're standing alone. And let me tell you, that feeling of reclaiming my dignity, of choosing myself for once, was sweeter than any birthday cake, richer than any dessert, and more satisfying than any applause. The days that followed were a whirlwind. News of what happened at the restaurant spread through the family like wildfire. Some called to check on me, their voices full of concern and, I suspect, a little curiosity. Others sent texts, some supportive, some not so much. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to explain myself or smooth things over. I simply told the truth. I was tired of being treated like an afterthought, and I was ready for a new chapter. It was as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, one I hadn't even realized I was carrying. With the sale of my company finalized, I found myself with a freedom I hadn't known in decades. No more early morning meetings, no more late night emails, no more juggling 1,000 responsibilities while trying to keep everyone else happy. My calendar, once packed to the brim, was suddenly wide open, a blank canvas waiting for me to paint my own picture. And so I did something I hadn't done in years. I started dreaming again. First, I booked a trip to Italy, a place I'd always wanted to visit but never found the time. I wandered the cobblestone streets of Rome, marveled at the art in Florence, and ate my weight in pasta on the Amalfi Coast. I laughed with strangers, took photos of sunsets, and even learned a few words of Italian, though my accent left much to be desired. For the first time in years, I felt truly alive, unburdened by expectations or obligations. I was just Helen, no titles, no roles, no baggage. When I returned home, I threw myself into volunteering. I'd always believed in giving back, but now I had the time and resources to make a real difference. I started working with a local women's shelter, helping other women find their voices and rebuild their lives. Their stories moved me, inspired me, and reminded me that strength comes in many forms. Some days I'd sit with a woman who'd lost everything, just listening, offering a hand to hold or a shoulder to cry on. Other days, I'd help organize fundraisers or teach workshops on financial independence. Each moment felt meaningful, a way to turn my own pain into purpose. And yes, I ate wherever I pleased, never in a bathroom. Thank you very much. I tried new restaurants, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends I'd neglected over the years. I discovered a love for sushi, developed a mild obsession with French pastries, and even took a cooking class or two. I learned that there's a special kind of joy in savoring a meal you chose for yourself, in a place where you feel welcome and respected. As for my family, things changed. Matthew called more often, sometimes just to chat, sometimes to apologize. Again, for not standing up for me. Our relationship was different. No more honest, less tangled in old expectations. Lauren, for her part, kept her distance at first, but over time, she reached out, her messages tentative and humble. I didn't rush to forgive her, but I didn't shut the door either. Healing takes time, and I was finally willing to let it happen at its own pace. Looking back, I realized that the night at the restaurant was a turning point, not just for me, but for everyone involved. It forced us all to confront uncomfortable truths, to reevaluate what we valued and how we treated each other. It wasn't easy and it wasn't painless, but it was necessary. Sometimes the hardest moments are the ones that set us free. So, let me ask you, dear reader, have you ever let someone walk all over you just to keep the peace? You ever swallowed your pride, bit your tongue, and told yourself it was easier to stay quiet than to speak up? I know I have more times than I care to admit. But what if, just once, you chose yourself? What if you stood up, straightened your jacket, and walked out of a situation that no longer served you? What if you realized that your worth isn't defined by how much you endure, but by how much you love yourself? Life is too short to eat in the bathroom, to sit quietly while others take up all the space. You have the power to change your story, to write a new chapter, to choose yourself. It's never too late, and you're never too old. Trust me, I'm living proof. If this story resonated with you, if it made you laugh, cry, or simply nod in understanding, I invite you to join me on this journey. Subscribe, share your own story, and remember, you are stronger than you think, and you deserve a seat at the table always.